usándolo, no había bandwidth. Pues solo para acordaros, lo que queremos hacer aquí es un taller con Peter van der Linden sobre los APIs de MasterCard. Va a ser en inglés. Está basado en San Francisco, ¿no? You are in San Francisco, right?
Yes, I am. I'm in Silicon Valley.
Silicon Valley. So, la idea es que explicará un poquito la gama de APIs que hay en MasterCard, que es, no sé si habéis visto un poquito, lo mío era bastante súper lindo, porque, claro, hay los que se piensa que hay, los de pagamento, ¿no? Pero también hay otros que a veces son en beta, pero que tienen cosas como que son los restaurantes más interesantes ahora en la ciudad a base de los pagos que se hacen, cosas así. Es decir, hay un mundo a descubrir, pienso que podría ser muy interesante. ¿Por qué? Porque al final es un tema transversal, ¿no? No solo por los retos de shopping y e-commerce, ¿no? Pago, hay otras soluciones también. Peter van der Linden is senior developer evangelist en MasterCard, es decir, tiene mucho conocimiento del mundo de desarrollo, viene de este mundo, y I think he will do a much better job in introducing himself. I just explained a little bit what's going to happen, and that we are really lucky to have you here. And take it away.
Okay, everybody. First of all, welcome from Silicon Valley, where I live and work, but I travel all over the world. And unfortunately, I was not able to travel to this hugely important event that you are part of. So instead, I'm giving you this live webinar, and there'll be an opportunity to ask questions. And if anything goes wrong from a technical point of view, I'll ask Anna or her colleague to stop me while we fix it, so we can give you the best possible experience. So with that said, I have a slide deck to show you. And let me do a screen share and put that online. I'm very open to questions at the end of the presentation, and I'll tell you some other resources too. Okay, so let's go. This is the deck I'm going to play you. And let's go full screen with that. All right, so I'm here today to introduce you to the way a software developer can connect to and integrate with the MasterCard Open APIs. There's quite a lot of background information to explain about this. So I've listed here 4 things that each developer can take away from this talk. The first one is an understanding of the basic vocabulary or terminology of the credit card world. There are special names for special roles in that world, and I need you to understand them in order to understand item 2, what the APIs do. Then the third piece of information I'll give you is some choices or alternatives or different approaches for how to code. Primarily there, we'll be looking at using an SDK versus using the REST protocol directly. And then the fourth thing, I'll outline security in this world. Security is vital in the financial world. Authentication, authorization. Who are you? Do you have the right to do this? How can we have evidence that this was done? So I've got a couple of slides to help you there. If you are the kind of person who takes photographs of slides, like I am, I do that all the time, this is the only slide you need to photograph. This link on the left, the first one, is a link to these slides at slideshare.net. So you can follow along now, if you wish, by using this URL, the first one. The second URL leads to a community forum where you can post questions in the weeks ahead and get answers from skilled developers inside MasterCard. We want you to be successful using these APIs, and so these are two resources for you. The third resource is the Twitter hashtag for the Smart Cities hackathon. So if you annotate your questions with this hashtag when you post in our forum, we'll know it's about the hackathon and we'll move it to the top of priority for answering. So take your pictures and look up the slides online, and you should be good. All right, so first section, credit card vocabulary or terminology or dictionary. Let's imagine there's a little boy called Isambard. And Isambard, it's his birthday, he has a credit card, he wants to buy a toy whistle. So this type of person in the credit card ecosystem is termed a consumer. It's somebody who buys something or consumes something. He is also known as a card holder for obvious reasons. He's holding a credit card. Now, every marketplace requires sellers as well as buyers. So let's look at the other side of that transaction. Here is a little girl, Acacia. She wants to sell some whistles, perhaps from her website, taking credit card payments. This type of actor is called a merchant, not a shopkeeper, not a store owner. The terminology is merchant. So we've got a consumer who is a card holder who wants to buy from a merchant. Now, these two people can't conduct their business because they don't have a direct connection. What they have behind each of them is a bank that represents them to the rest of the system. Isambard, the little boy, his credit card was issued to him by a bank. They assessed his credit worthiness, they looked at his income, and then they issued him a credit card. So they are called an issuer. A bank issues a card, that's an issuing bank. On the other side of the transaction, behind the merchant, they will have an account that allows them to receive credit card payments, and that bank is that account is held at a bank, and the type of bank is called an acquiring bank. The bank acquires, that is, takes over or accepts debts that are owed to Acacia. When somebody buys something with a credit card, they are promising to pay you, and that's a debt, and the acquiring bank acquires it. So those are 4 players in the system. Now let me show you a diagram which says this might be just a little bit more complicated than you thought. If we start at this bright red arrow over on the left, the transaction begins when a card holder goes to a merchant website. So card holder going down and to the right, they say, oh, I would like that whistle from that website, and they put it in their cart and they go to checkout, and that causes their information to be sent to the merchant website, and they can make an inquiry of the bank that acquires their debts. They can say, is this card holder good for the money? And the merchant bank doesn't know directly, so they ask that same question, continuing to go around the circle of the MasterCard network, the credit card network, and they go to the bank that issued the card to the little boy. And they review his payment record, and then the transaction goes backwards with all the information saying yes or no. And that process is called authorization. So when you want to buy something expensive like a hotel room, they will first of all authorize it with your issuing bank, and that's the chain of communication that takes place. Now, there is a number of other ones which I'm not going to go through here: batching, taking payment, clearing, funding, settlement, and they all have some interplay in this type of circle. And I just wanted to let you know about that sometimes these transactions involve intermediate steps. So that's to be clear on that. And there's an excellent document, the link to it is here, that gives you these credit card basics. They'll be helpful sometimes just to get a cheat sheet or a quick read through. And this particular one is a good one, and it includes a glossary or dictionary of terms. It looks like this. There's the link again on the left. And when you are stuck reading our documentation, this is the key that you need. All right, so let's go on now to what can we do with these APIs? What can we do with the MasterCard APIs? If you go to our website, developer.mastercard.com, you'll find a screen that looks very like this, and you'll be invited to register, as this red circle on the top right shows. It's a free registration with an email confirmation, very quick and easy to do, and allows you to see a little bit more of the site and download things than visiting without registration, logging in. If you click on this link here, the very first one labeled APIs, the tab towards the top right, you'll get a page like the rest of the page shown underneath. Excuse me. Yeah. This page has a big square icon, a big rectangular icon for each of about 16 or 17 APIs, and you can click on any of these individually to drill down on that API. So I'm now going to present these APIs to you in the form of actors. Do you remember a few slides back we identified these individual roles: issuing bank, acquiring bank, merchant, consumer? Well, it turns out that there are particular APIs associated with, intended for, each of those roles. And that's how I will present them and explain them to you. And that's why we needed to go through the terminology first. So this is a list of our APIs that are intended to do something useful for consumers. That's the individual, the boy who wanted to buy the whistle. Now, I'm not going to bore you by reading this whole list to you. I'd simply point out that we have more consumer-oriented APIs than APIs for any of the other actors. So this should be your starting point of APIs to use. Let's call out a couple of these. The first one, excuse me, the Locations API. As the name suggests, you can give, you can provide an address or a set of latitude, longitude coordinates, and you'll be given back a list of nearby automated teller machines and various other kinds of card topping up facilities that are nearby. So that's a very simple API to use and gives you some useful information. Let's go on down, 1, 2, 3, 4 more. Local favorites. So this is an interesting API, and we provide this through some basic data mining. Again, you'll give an address or latitude, longitude coordinates, and you'll get back a list of restaurants ordered by how many of their patrons are local people. So if a restaurant we find in some tourist area, San Francisco maybe, it's in the middle of the tourist district, but 75% of the credit card payments come from people with an adjacent postal code, we know that this is a restaurant favored by locals. On the other side, if 90% of the payments to some other restaurant are from people who don't live anywhere near there, we know that's a restaurant popular with tourists. So there's a little bit of information that you can pull out and use there in your hacking. And that would be the Local Favorites API. I'll let you look at the rest of them at your leisure. Let's look at now at the merchant APIs. So the very first one we call Simplify Commerce. This comes with an SDK, a software development kit, to let you engage with it. And it very simply adds the ability to pay by any credit card, not just a MasterCard, to a merchant's website. So that's probably the most common thing you're going to want to do. And so Simplify Commerce is an API for you to look at in more detail. And I'll give you more about that later. So there's a couple of wallet-related APIs for MasterPass. MasterPass is just a way of maintaining a wallet of cards online. Those can be business cards, payment cards, prepaid cards, credit cards. You just maintain them as a group and select one of them as you wish to pay. This is a larger and more complex API. My suggestion is not to start with this one. Let's go down the list a bit more and look at lost and stolen cards. This does exactly what you expect. Here's a card number. Has it been reported lost or stolen? Yes or no? So that's a very easy API to use. Fraud scoring. If a merchant wants to know how much risk there is with a particular transaction, they can use the fraud score API to see if Isambard is likely to default or not. You ask the question for an amount of money and a card number, and you'll get back an integer in the range 0 to 999 that represents the risk, and the merchant can decide for themselves how much risk they want to take. Okay, issuing bank. Remember, this is the bank that issues a credit card to somebody. So there's several APIs here. The merchant ID is probably the only one that's going to be of interest to you. And then the acquirer APIs. This is very specialized now. This is an ability, this gives the ability to an acquiring bank to look at the prior record of some particular business and the people involved with it, and make a judgment on whether their record is good enough that they want to get into a business relationship with them. Highly specialized. All right, so this is a test. So these are about 10 use cases of different APIs. And the question I'm throwing out to the room is, say you wanted to do the third thing in here, to protect your store from attack, to protect your merchant business from attack. What APIs would you use? All of the rest of these, they're use cases. This is one use case. Well, it's a merchant. So let's go back to the merchant APIs. And which of these is going to protect you against fraud? If we look down the list, we can see two that jump out right away. They're the second and third up from the bottom. So the lost stolen card API checks if a card that you have the number of is stolen or lost. So that will protect you, knowing that. And then fraud score. If you wanted to see, you're a car dealer, you sell very expensive cars in the tens of thousands of euros, and you let people buy them on credit card. You don't do many transactions, but you want to know how risky one is before you put it through. This is the API you'd use. So hopefully that makes it a little bit clearer. So the answer is lost stolen card and the fraud scoring. And for each of these use cases, you'll find an API. The first one here, top left, to sell a hat to Zach or sell a whistle to Isambard, you'd use the Simplify Commerce API. Okay, so we've covered the first two topics completely. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about two choices that you have for how to use these APIs. So the first choice is a software development kit. So this is a library of code that makes an environment that you can download and integrate with your code, and that will let you use that particular API. And for two of our APIs, MasterPass and Simplify Commerce, this is your only choice. That's the only way we make the functionality available for you to download the SDK. For all the rest all the remainder of the APIs, you've got an alternative choice. You can use a REST API. We will tell you the URL and the kind of string that you can use to get or post there to ask the question, and you will get back an XML document with the answer. So those are your two alternatives for programming. Now, the drawback with using the REST APIs, they have tremendous advantages. They're language independent. They're very simple to understand. The drawback is because these are financial applications, we require quite a high level of security, and you're going to have to code that yourself. It's not impossible. It's just going to take 2 or 3 days of your time. And I'll explain in more detail what that involves in a coming slide. All right, let's show you how to get to the documentation for the individual SDKs and APIs. You've already registered at the site. Let's assume you've logged in. You've gone to this particular page with the URL at the top. You're looking at the icons. You click on one of these, like Simplify Commerce, for example, and you will go to the page that describes that. So this is a page that you get to from there. And this is, I'm particularly drawing your attention to the tab at the top called Tutorial. This steps you through a working example of how to get Simplify running. And most people are successful with this. The most basic thing you can do is read the overview and then read about the payments form to capture details and charging a card. It's got little diagrams, and the thing I would particularly call out in this is that sometimes there are things that aren't completely obvious, like to improve the overall security of Simplify Commerce, we try to make the credit card number never go through your back-end server in your system. So we try to set things up in the JavaScript so that the credit card number goes to the Simplify server, and that is flow 1 above. The Simplify server will send back a token, magic token. This is simply something that looks exactly like a card number, but it hasn't been issued to anybody. And the client browser can send that token to your server. And if that's intercepted, stolen, eavesdropped, it doesn't really matter because it's a one-time use token. And you can't replay it for man-in-the-middle attacks. It times out very quickly, adds a lot of security. And so your server would then try to charge against that account number, and you'd be successful. So I just wanted to tell you, sometimes there are things that are not completely obvious. Use our community forums if you have questions. The Simplify Commerce SDK comes in 9 different flavors for different operating environments, the 2 mobile platforms, C# and .NET, Java, of course, JavaScript. So you've got a lot of choice to work with your favorite languages. And here's how you would download an SDK for one of the REST APIs. There's a little icon at the bottom right when you drill down onto an individual API. This is for locations, the locations API that we mentioned earlier. Wow, how about that? We're almost at the end. I'm going to give you now some pointers for integrating with the REST APIs. I'm going to tell you where the documentation can be found. I'm going to remind you of some of the useful things. Most of our 15 or 16 APIs are expressed in the form of REST APIs. You connect to a socket, you post to it or get from it with HTTP or HTTPS protocols, and you get the answer in the form of an XML document. So there's 2 exceptions to this. You can't use REST for Simplify Commerce or MasterPass, but I'm telling you not to start with MasterPass. Start with Simplify Commerce. If you do want to get involved with wallets, look for the hosted payments aspect of the MasterPass wallet. That connects trivially to Simplify. So you'll have a wallet and a payment capturing mechanism by using that approach. I've already pointed out that this comes in 7 or 8 languages or development platform environments. How do you know what the URLs are? Well, let's assume you've clicked on the Locations API in that grid of rectangular boxes. You've come to this page, and you'll see that there are some tabs about 1/3 of the way down. And if you click on Resources, you'll see that the 2 URLs that can be used. The first URL, the sandbox, is for testing your code and developing it. You will always be using this in a hackathon. The production URL is when you've deployed your application, you've got written agreements with MasterCard or whatever's required to have a way of paying for the API use. In the sandbox, it's completely free, of course, and that's how you would get going. Notice the other ringed tab, Sample Code. So one of these other ringed tabs, either Resources, Sandbox, Error Codes, or Sample Code, will have the inquiry strings that you can pass across. It will have sample test numbers for credit cards that you can use that will always give some particular result. They'll always be accepted. They'll always be rejected, so that you can do your testing. And you'll find these on this page under these tabs. Okay, let's look at security. So you can't just send messages wildly if they're financial messages. You need to protect yourself a bit better so that you know who the message came from with some degree of certainty, so that you can avoid it being replayed to you and having the transaction happen a second time, and so that you can be assured that you're dealing with the person who's allowed to ask you that kind of question. Our security relies on an RSA key pair, so we're using public key infrastructure here, and your public key, there's ways to generate it on our website, you'll see that, or if you use OpenSSL commands yourself, you can self-generate. You deliver the public key to MasterCard in a certificate signing request. If you've worked with this kind of system before, this will be very familiar to you. If you haven't, it's very quick to Google on it and read up about it. We use OAuth 1 with the Google body hash extension. We use OAuth 1 to authenticate you. We use a number used once, a nonce. This is a cryptographic term, meaning that you have to generate a number and remember what it was, and when you're doing another transaction, use another number. You'd only use that nonce a second time if you're trying to cancel or refund that same transaction. Okay? When you've created a request body, your different fields giving the coordinates or the amount of the transaction, whatever it is, you're going to do a secure hash algorithm 1 hash of the request body, and then base 64 encode that so it's all printable. This is pretty straightforward. You can find libraries to do that easily. And then the last step is to sign the base string using your private key. MasterCard in the sandbox environment or the production environment will have your public key, and so it can check that this message appeared to come from you. Here, underneath in red, is the link that gives the full details of this. And that's a page or two of coding, and it must be absolutely perfect or the sandbox won't understand what you're asking for. So you've got several months to perfect your code, so this should not be a problem. You've got the forum to ask questions. A lot of people have been successful before you. You will be successful too. Just a reminder, this is what a REST URL looks like in the documentation. You'll see that it's laid out for you like this. The right-hand end of the URL says which API it is, which version it is, and then you'll add your arguments to it like this, shown below in the URL with arguments. That line starting format equals XML and page offset. And then that's the piece that gets OAuthhorized, securely hashed, encrypted, signed, etc. Just so everybody's on the same page with me here. If you get this wrong, this is the kind of error message that you'll get back from the sandbox, saying the first thing that it can detect is wrong. So it's a little XML document. All right, so this is probably pretty much the last question that I'd like to address. What is the difference between using an SDK and using a REST API? You've told me there's two alternatives. Why would I choose one over the other? Here's my advice. For the simpler operations, just use the REST APIs if you're prepared to do the security annotations yourself. For the more complicated APIs, like taking payments on a website, the SDKs are totally the way to go. They have slightly higher level operations like take payment, do an authorization. Whereas with the REST APIs, you're getting a string or you're posting a document. Okay, so the second big point here is that within the SDKs, you don't have to code the security manually. That last slide that I showed with the apply OAuth, have a public key infrastructure, hash the body, use this particular extent. That will be done for you in an SDK. And then the last major difference is that when you use an SDK, you get a response back as an object, not an XML document. If you're inquiring of a REST API, you'll get an XML document back, and it's up to you to reinflate that into a meaningful object. So those are the differences. Whichever you choose, you're going to need your own key pair. There's a simple way to generate that on one of the web pages, so you'll have to get that and use it. Another tip here, this URL, very, very useful if you're ever getting XML or sending XML. It checks the document validity. It's just a trivial thing, but it's very helpful to spot errors that you can't. Save my bacon more than once. And really, that's the end of the formal presentation. You can tweet to me at FUDMuffin. You can tweet, I hope you will tweet about the Smart Cities hackathon here. I've pointed you at our forums. I've pointed out which slide is the one to photograph. And that's really everything I have to say, except thank you for your extraordinary patience. Please use our resources, and we will do our best to not let you down and answer your questions and help you connect with the payments industry for whatever awesome idea you have. And Anna, I'm happy to hear questions through you and try to relay them. I'm tremendously excited for all the people in this enormously important event. I'm really hoping that my boss will let me visit you in Barcelona later in the year. I love Barcelona. I've been lucky enough to be there several times, mostly for Mobile World Congress. I always go to the museums. I always walk the boulevards. I always meet fantastic new people. I'm hoping I get the chance later in the year. So, over to you, Anna.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much. Let's give him an applause. Let's see if there are any questions. Yes, sir.
I have two questions. One is, all this data I see in one is only for Mexico. All the data is globally, is for the world.
Okay, so the audio was a little garbled for me. Microphone's not very good. Anna, could you repeat the question for me?
I think the question was if the data are global and or if they are for a location, specific location, or if they're for any country.
Um, still bad. Could you look at the microphone and just again ask the question? I heard that it was about location API.
No, it was if the data are available globally for any country.
Oh, okay, excellent. A really good question. So the question is, Peter, you've told us about this location API, and there was another one, places, that used geographic information. Is that available for every country? That's a super question. And the answer is, it's both good and bad, but it's more good than bad. So yes, it's available for any country, anywhere in the world, any address, but the data is just test data, not real data. So, for example, if you ask for a list of teller machines near some particular address in Madrid, it's going to reply at random. So it's not live data. You only get the live data in production. And you'll be given fake data when you're testing. And it might be ridiculous fake data. It might have an ATM machine in the middle of the sea, if you happen to be a city on the coast. So you can move forward, but you'd have to add your own fake data to be able to reliably demonstrate the use of a system.
Other question. I see. One is, there is other APIs, other kind of data, like the total amount of transaction in any place. Similar, I don't know if you know the BBVA bank in Spain. They offer the data in Spain and Mexico with all this information, the total transaction.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I understand the question. So I'm hearing.
And one more, and then is in production, this data is real time. How many times what is the difference between this happen and you can see in the API? Is more or less real time or is historic data?
Okay, so let me try the second question, and then I'll try the third question. So the second question is, we'd like to have more insight into a particular customer and maybe look at a list of his transactions. Can we do that as a bank or a merchant? And the answer is, well, for a merchant, no. And I'm sure it's against the law in the EU too, that just because you have one credit card debt with a company doesn't mean that a merchant can see all of your other credit card debt. A bank certainly can, but they don't need to do it through this API, and so we don't offer an API like that. So the answer is, that sounds like a really interesting system that you've described. We don't have a feature that matches that in this family of APIs. We do in the real world, but we do it by offering a private API to an acquiring bank or an issuing bank. And let me go to the third question, which was perhaps you can remind me about the detail you were asking about.
Real-time data. If all these APIs are real-time data.
Yeah. So is this real-time data? You know, if I put through an authorization, is that going to be visible anywhere in the world? And is it going to happen quickly enough to affect the real world? And the answer is, in the sandbox, no. In production, yes, absolutely. That's a basic requirement. So while you're developing and testing your app, you won't see that kind of integrity, but in production, you will do. So it just costs a lot to build that into a system. And the sandbox APIs, they're all completely free. They're easy to engage with in that sense. We want to remove as many barriers as possible, and that's why. So, are there any other questions from my friends in Barcelona? So let me remind you again about the community forums. You can find all of this at developer.mastercard.com. I'm really hoping I'm going to meet some of you in the months ahead. And I guess that's all I have right now. This is a webinar that we're recording for YouTube. I'm going to email the URL to Anna when I get it in a few minutes' time.
I have a question for you.
Of course.
It's not a technical question, it's more of an idea, because I like the idea of the local favorites API, but is it limited only to restaurants, and why it doesn't include other places like shops or hotels or doctors or other places?
All right, so Anna is asking the obvious question, which is, Peter, you've told us about the locations API where we can find tourist trap restaurants and businesses that restaurants that are or are not patronized by local people. But can't we think bigger? I mean, wouldn't we like to know that about garage repair places and clockmakers and bakers? And yes, we would. What we've done here is shipped an experimental API and said, let's put this in front of developers and see what they can do with it. And when we see what they can do with it, we will look at how we need to extend that. So excellent question. And this is in the process of evaluation for how do we best build this out, scale it up, generalize it. So yeah, that's where we are now.
Thank you.
All right, so you guys are just totally awesome, and I'm hoping so much that we're going to see some great smart city ideas, and I'm going to say goodbye, and I will really truly hope to see you later in the year. So.
Thank you, Peter.